This past weekend, Argentina elected for the first time a Libertarian candidate for president. We discussed this with journalists Camila Escalamte and Stephen Sefton via Skype on Wednesday. Camila, maybe you could give us a background first.
Well, on Sunday, Argentines took to the polls once again in the second round, the runoff of their presidential election. And we saw the candidate, Javier Milei, win with 55% of the vote. And of course, the supposedly center-left candidate, Sergio Massa, who's in the current government now, and for a lot of people was the favorite to win and who won in the first round. He received just 45% of the vote. Of course, he won that first round of elections several weeks back. And I think that gave them a little bit of false confidence or false hope in the same way that we saw the leftist candidate win the first round of elections in Ecuador and then go on to lose in the second round to the right-wing candidate, Daniel Noboa there. So we're seeing a little bit of the same. And it seems like the left in South America is really losing the plot. They're unable to take the momentum or the strength that they should have from having such large political organizations, from having governed recently or currently in the case of Argentina, and not using that as the incumbent party or political movement in the country to be able to retain power. So I think some people were very surprised by it because Sergio Massa did come in first in that previous round. But it's not a surprise to anyone who's been keeping tabs on what's been going on in Latin America in general. And so this has been very, I would say, sad, shocking, upsetting for a lot of the neighboring countries. We heard some responses from Gustavo Petro, from Lula. They've said that, of course, that they're going to work with this neighbor country because they're, all part of South America, of Mercosur, of, such an important trade partner. Argentina is such an important trade partner for Brazil and so forth. But they're not happy about the outcome. The Latin American left and certainly South America had hoped to see Sergio Massa win. And I think it's very telling in terms of where we are, that so many people around the world are claiming to be seeking for this sort of multipolar world. They're completely done with U.S. dominance and U.S. hegemony. But at the same time, we've ceded so much ground to the far right and the sort of ideas that are reflected by Javier Milei, who has won and who's going to govern now. And so he's someone who, during the campaign, he and his supporters in the last few weeks was holding up the Zionist Israeli flag at rallies and has really expressed some very radical extremist views, some obviously neoliberal views of completely destroying the state, closing down ministries, and he's threatened to do all sorts of different things that will be absolutely catastrophic for Argentina, a country that already has extremely high levels of inflation and where things have gotten extremely difficult.
People don't realize, I think most people don't realize the deep contradictions in Milei. I mean, he's in. Some people compare him to Trump, and to some extent, Donald Trump, former president of the United States. And to some extent, I think that's legitimate. But I don't think they realize how dark Milei's actual program is. And you can see how dark it is from the point of view of internal domestic repression, from the fact that he's chosen, or apparently chosen, Victoria Villarruel to be his interior minister. And she is a member, and a very outspoken and unapologetic member of one of the main families that supported the Argentinian dictatorship between 1976 and 1983. And she's going to be in charge of interior ministry policy and internal domestic security and so on. In relation to that, one of the things that Milei said in that notorious interview he did with Tucker Carlson many weeks ago now was that here you have this person talking continually about how the state is a bad thing, how it has to be dismantled, how everything has to be thrown open to free markets and free enterprise. But immediately after saying that, he says that when I win, I'm going to use the state to repress all all the criminals who have been responsible for bringing Argentina to its current condition. So you have this deep contradiction between a stupid, idiotic, oafish contradiction in his thinking about the state. And you also have to realize that Milei is by no means an outsider. He's always been portrayed as an outsider, particularly in Argentina. And it's astonishing to me that people in Argentina have allowed themselves to be duped in that way, because Milei is very much a creature of the Argentinian elites. And you saw that from the way in which his campaign was very strongly promoted by Mauricio Macri, who's the person that engaged in that negotiation with the IMF that imposed an essentially illegal debt of an unprecedented debt of a loan from the IMF of over $40 million. So I think I don't think people quite realize the dimensions of what this Milei presidency is likely to mean.
Yeah, that was $40 billion, not $40 million.
Yeah, sorry, $40 billion, yeah.
One of the things that people in Latin America are terrified of course, Lula, is what harm this could cause to their relationship, the relationship of South America with China and the Belt and Road projects up ahead. And, the ability for these countries to implement alternative currencies and different ways of trading to try to get past, on the one hand, the use of the dollar in general, but specifically to overcome or mitigate the effects of the sanctions that have made it so difficult to trade with neighboring countries and what should be close partners, countries like Venezuela and Cuba and other countries as well. And so that's going to be catastrophic. But it's also important to say that people have taken their eye off of the enemy. They have let them sneak in. In this case, the Washington actually had three candidates. They had Bullrich was their number one candidate. That was, Macri's candidate. And then they came in with these other two, the supposedly center-left candidate and Milei. And they have seen in some way or another, Washington sees all of these as a win. They would have been able to, nevertheless, sabotage some of the important Latin American integrationist projects, even with Massa. But it just comes to show that we have a problem with, understanding what the enemy is, keeping our eyes on what the enemy is doing at the different times. But, it's going to take a whole lot more mobilization, a lot more educating, the regular people to try to overcome this. I mean, in what way is it going to be possible to overcome this sort of a government that won so convincingly in this election?
The combined vote in the first round of Milei and Bullrich was practically 54%. In other words, it was already a majority, even though Massa came in first with 36.68%. Milei had 29.98%. And Bullrich had 23.83. So whether Massa is in the U.S. column or the independence column or whatever, the other two candidates constituted a majority in the first runoff, and obviously hostile to the whole idea of integration into BRICS and other things. And so they won, no matter who won, as you say.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at this for a full term, I guess. And we'll speak with you again next week.
Thank you.
Thanks a million, Don. Look forward to talking to you next week.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.